If God had an FAQ section of his website, I think the number one question that would show up is something along the lines of what theologians call the problem of evil. Or, in layman's terms, is if God is all good, all powerful, all knowing, then why is there still pain, suffering, and hell in the world, in existence? Today in this video, I'm going to give my best attempt to provide you with 3 responses to what has become known as the most difficult question and challenge in Christianity. If God was so good, he would want to alleviate pain and suffering. If he was so knowing, he'd know about it. If he was so powerful, he'd be able to. Well, why doesn't he? Why doesn't he? This is a question that has stumped philosophers, but it's not just the question that philosophers sip over their iced tea and chat about it. This is the question for parents who are grieving. This is the question for people who are struggling in this post-COVID world with depression and anxiety. This is the question I had to deal with when I attended a funeral when I was in 7th grade for my 19-year-old cousin. This is a question you will deal with over and over again if you believe in God, and maybe even if you don't believe in God. You still have to deal with why is there so much pain and suffering in the world. The first response is this. It's called the greater good defense. The greater good defense. And there are actually 3 versions to this defense. The first version to the greater good defense is called the free will defense. And this is probably the most popular response to the problem of evil. This is saying we have free will and it's the greater good. So the idea of greater good means that God allows for evil because there is a greater purpose. There's something better coming out of it. And one of the things that could be better is free will. Free will is that this incredible gift that God has given to humankind, that we are given the choice to accept him or reject him. This is like the litmus test for love, is there's actually choice there. And so how the reasoning goes is that, well, we were given choice, which is an incredible gift, but if it's a real choice, that means we can really choose as humanity to reject God. And that's what we did, is we've sinned, we've rejected God, we've disobeyed, and because of that, there have been unfathomable number of ramifications because of our sin, because of the wrong that we've done. There's more than just the free will defense. The second version of the greater good defense is known as the soul-making defense. The soul-making defense. And this is the fact that if you were to look at your life and you were to look at what caused you to be the person you are, maybe not the pain and the anxiety you deal with, but the good qualities, the endurance, the wisdom you have, the compassion you have, what has caused the greatest growth in your life, most people would say that it's come out of suffering and out of pain. You see, what if God uses our pain and our suffering and it's almost as if it's necessary to grow us into the people God wants to shape us into. It's actually making our souls. Part of why I look at that is there's actually a verse in Hebrews that says that Jesus learned obedience through the things he suffered. You know, nowhere else in the New Testament do we have that Jesus had a teacher, that Jesus learned from anything else. Jesus was Jesus. Jesus was the Son of God. Who can teach Jesus? Well, apparently, the only thing that is strong enough, wise enough to teach Jesus was pain, was suffering. And what if the greater good for the pain and suffering we deal with, even if it feels as though there can be no good coming out of it, what if it is actually the biggest thing that is forming us, is crafting us in the people we were called to be? So that's the version of the greater good called the soul-making defense. The next version of the greater good is called the second-order defense, the second-order goods. So there are second order goods, and that's sort of like everything else. So maybe it's free will, maybe it's that it's forming us as human beings, but really there are things in the world that are so good and so pleasant that wouldn't be if it wasn't for evil and suffering. You see, we love justice. I am a fan of Law and Order, and I'll watch it whenever it comes out on Fridays or whatever. And there's something about seeing justice prevail that my heart yearns for. Or when you see a story of somebody overcoming great obstacles, I mean, it moves you to tears. Or to see like somebody making a big sacrifice to show compassion to somebody who has less, somebody moving across the world to serve people in need. You know, there's something about that inspires us, that keeps us motivated. And yet none of that would be possible if there wasn't for suffering to begin with. C.S. Lewis puts it like this, that God whispers to us in our pleasures, He speaks to us in our conscience, but He shouts in our pain. It is His megaphone to rouse a deaf world. You see, there are some things that would not come through if it were not for pain. And so many times we think that the pain that we experience points to there must be an evil God or God's angry at me. What if it is the love of God that He has for you is why you experience pain? I think of the other day when I was in high school. I was walking to school and I heard this horrible, horrible scream from a man that sounded like it was a dad screaming abusively to his son. And I turned around thinking, what am I going to witness here? And what I saw was this 3-year-old boy about to step foot into traffic. And the dad wasn't screaming out of violence. He wasn't screaming abusively. He was screaming out of desperation to get his son's attention. So many times we think that God is mad at us. God just wants to punish us. What if God is trying to rescue us from something we're going to get ourselves into? There are second order goods all over the world. And we may not recognize them. We may not be able to point to exactly the reason for every pain. But we see it enough to trust that God could be causing good in everything that happens. So my first response is the greater good defense, which comes in 3 different versions. There's the free will defense, there's the soul-making defense, and there is the second order good defense. And so I really believe taken together, these different versions create a compelling response to the problem of evil. But I do have 2 other responses to it. One response, my next one, is to say that this is not only a Christian problem. You see, so many times we point at Christianity and say that this is a challenge that unravels and dismantles our belief in a Christian God. But no matter what worldview you have, you're going to have to deal with the problem of evil, even if you don't even believe in God. You see, if you're an atheist, you've got to deal with a problem that there is evil. Well, how do you say, where's your standards for this evil if there's no moral law giver? Is it all about survival of the fittest? Well, if it were, then you can't be so grotesque. You can't be so disgusted when things are so bad, because what if that were just people surviving? I think so many times the atheist has a real burden in their hands, and we don't even really notice it so much, is that for them to say that there is no God is really hard to say that there is absolute evil. In fact, in the 70s, there was a mom who went to prom, gave birth to a child, stuffed the child in a trash can. And of course, that's awful, and that's disgusting, and that's evil. But what makes it even worse is that week a New York Times article comes out by an atheist who tried defending this mom for her actions, saying that this was an instinct of mom trying to survive herself, and that we shouldn't blame her for what she did. You see, the atheist worldview has some challenges themselves. I'm not saying that they don't have any answers. I don't want to create any straw men with this, but what I do want to say is that Christians aren't the only ones who have to deal with this problem. In fact, if you believe in karma, that may create some other problems for you dealing with suffering. I think of a pastor, Mark Clark, who traveled to another country. When his plane landed, he was given a ride through the streets, and he saw some horrible, horrible suffering going on and people begging for help. And the driver of the car says, "Don't you dare help. Don't you dare do anything, because if you do something to alleviate the suffering, then they will need to repeat it in their next life." And so inherently within karma is this idea that we don't help people, apparently, because that might not let karma do its job. And so there's some issues there. There's some challenges, at least. And I'm not saying that I know everything about karma or everything about atheism. What I'm saying is that Christianity isn't the only worldview that has to deal with the problem of evil. My third response and final response is this, is how does Jesus respond to pain, suffering, evil? What does Jesus do to respond to this? And I think that this is the thing that makes Christianity the most compelling, is because Jesus responds to evil and suffering by suffering himself. God is not so removed from our pain that he has no idea what's going on, but God became flesh, and God became one of us, and he suffered himself on the cross. Even before then, he was a normal human being who had headaches and wanted to sleep in and had sore knees every now and then. Jesus became a human being, just like you and me. But then he also, when he was 33 years old, he gave his life for us. He was tortured under Roman rule. He was put on a cross, and he was killed with excruciating pain and utter mental humiliation and agony, separated from God. This is what Jesus does to answer suffering. Jesus doesn't just hear our screams of pain. Jesus is there on the cross screaming with us. Jesus can understand your pain and suffering, and because Jesus died on the cross, he set up a system where we can have real freedom, where there will be a day where there will be no more tears or crying or pain or suffering for those who have a relationship with Jesus. And I want to invite you, if you want to know more about God, if you want to know more about this relationship with Jesus, we invite you to be a part of our community here at Anchor. Please go ahead, subscribe to our YouTube channel, check us out on different channels. We're on Facebook, Instagram, find us online, but we would love to connect with you. We have these groups that meet every week. We would love to really get to know you. You are more than welcome to be a part of our community, where people are jumping in from all different walks of life, and we want to create a safe place for you to take steps closer and closer to God, to take steps in your spiritual journey. And so you're invited to be a part of all that. But I do want to ask, what do you think of these different responses? In the comments below, what is the most compelling? What's the one that gets you like, yes, that is true? And maybe what's one that may be a little weaker that I shared today? Go ahead and share your thoughts in the comments below. And until then, we'll see you next time.